My mom works in an office, and I know all too well what it's like to silently carry the weight of your family, your job, and other people's expectations. This video isn't just for use, it's a story that many will recognize themselves in. To understand that it's time to set boundaries, all names and companies are fictional. Don't repeat other people's mistakes.
I knew exactly how the night was going to end the second the waiter laid that black folder down in front of me. Mom was mid-toast, eyes glazed with Chardonnay and pride, holding her glass up to the chandelier like it was some kind of divine offering. To my daughter Elise, she said, voice trembling like she was accepting an Oscar, for teaching me that strength can be loud and soft things can be powerful. Everyone turned to Elise. Of course they did. There she was in white satin, hair curled to perfection. Blinking those Bambi eyes like this was her coronation. Then thump. The bill hit the table. Right in front of me. $3,190. No tip included. And the kicker? Elise smirked. Full lips curled like she was in on a private joke. That kind of smile that says, "Oh, sweetie, you know the drill." Before we go further, I just want to say, if you're listening and this already feels like a story you know too well, hit that subscribe button and tap like. It means the world to the team that works so hard to get these stories out, and trust me, what's coming? You don't want to miss it. I didn't say a word when the waiter left. I didn't have to. The silence said enough. My son looked up from the far end of the table, eyes flicking between me and the bill like he was watching a test he already knew the answer to. My husband shifted in his seat beside me. And Mom? She kept holding that damn glass, like if she didn't move, maybe the responsibility wouldn't find her. Classic. It had always been like this. I was the one they leaned on for everything. The quiet fallback. Hospital rides at 3 a.m. when Mom's blood pressure spiked. Elise's last-minute rent gaps when her startup flopped after 3 Instagram posts. Even Mom's mortgage shortfalls during the lean years, covered with a smile and a "don't worry about it." No dramatic speeches. No IOUs. Just me, handling what needed handling. Elise, on the other hand, was always in the middle of something. A rebrand. A launch. A retreat. Never a job that lasted more than 6 months, but always enough followers to land a comped yoga mat and a protein bar sponsorship. And yet, somehow, she was the sun we all orbited around. She's just figuring herself out, Mom would say. Like that explained why I was the one sending in Mom's insurance paperwork while Elise posted skincare tutorials from Bali. We all played our roles. Me, the fixer, the doer, the one quietly keeping the train from derailing. Elise, the princess wandering through a never-ending coming-of-age story. And Mom? Mom was the director, cueing applause whenever Elise cried or posted another healing is messy TikTok. I didn't mind. Not really. Not for a long time. I built a business, brick by brick, while they scrolled. Logistics isn't sexy, but it pays the bills. I married a man who sees me, really sees me. We raised a boy who knows what steadiness looks like. I didn't need applause. I just needed a little respect. Maybe a thank you. Maybe just not having the bill dumped in my lap like it was a tradition. But that night, something shifted. Maybe it was the smirk. Maybe it was the way Mom never looked at me once after she toasted Elise like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. Or maybe it was the weight of that damn black folder, pressing down like every unpaid favor I'd ever swallowed. All I know is I looked at my son, then at my sister's champagne flute, and I felt something snap. Not in a loud way. Not like glass shattering. No, this break was quiet. Clean. The kind that doesn't bleed until later. Because in that moment, I wasn't just the responsible one. I was done. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I got a call from Mom while I was at the warehouse doing year-end prep. Forklifts beeped in the background, invoices stacked on my clipboard, and she started the conversation like she always did, casually dropping something massive like it was a weather report. "So, I reserved the private dining room at the Brantley Club," she said, as if she were telling me she bought new napkins. "For Thanksgiving. Something special. Elise just wrapped up her podcast series, and it's been such a journey for her." I paused, pen in hand. "The Brantley Club? Oh, it'll be lovely," she breezed on. "White linen, florals, the whole thing. Just family. 15 of us. They do a beautiful meal with vegan options for Elise. My pen hovered midair. And who's paying for this? There was a soft laugh, like I'd told a little joke. Well, it's under your name, so just keep an eye out for the confirmation email. She didn't ask. Just dropped it like a command wrapped in a compliment. Under my name. The oldest trick in the family playbook. Use my credit, my steadiness, my lack of drama, and dress it up like responsibility was an honor. Later that night, while my husband rinsed dishes and our son worked on a science project at the kitchen table, I opened the email. Brantley Club reservation confirmed. Party of 15. $3,000 deposit charged. My stomach twisted. Not because I couldn't afford it, I could. But because, once again, it wasn't a conversation. It was a sentence. One they assumed I'd serve with wine and a smile. Elise didn't even text. No offer to split the cost. No, thanks for booking. But her Instagram was already buzzing. Teaser posts about something elegant and empowering this Thanksgiving. A black and white photo of her journal next to a glass of rose, captioned, "Big things ahead." I didn't need to look hard to know what was coming. Mom called again the next day. "It'll be so good for Elise to feel seen," she said, with that dreamy tone she saved for anything Elise related. She's worked so hard on this podcast. Worked? Elise had recorded 7 episodes on her phone, half of them rambling monologues about astrology and body oil. But I bit my tongue. Again. It's her time, Mom went on. And I just think, after everything she's been through, she deserves this. I stared at my laptop screen. A spreadsheet of Q4 shipping schedules blinked back at me. I thought of Elisa's everything, a breakup with a guy she dated for 6 weeks, a retreat that ended early because she got bored, a blog that flamed out after one post titled, "Why Mercury is My Spirit Animal." Meanwhile, I was paying 2 employees overtime because one of them had a baby due and the other's car died last week. But sure, it was Elisa's time. I didn't argue. What would be the point? I just nodded and made sure my Amex was paid off. Then I told my husband, and he frowned. "You're really doing this again?" I shrugged. "If I say no, it's drama. If I say yes, it's invisible." He dried his hands. "So maybe it's time for something else." I didn't answer right away, because deep down, I knew he was right. But when you've spent a lifetime being the one who catches the falling plates, you forget you can step out of the kitchen, even when the fire's not yours. I told myself it was just one dinner, just Thanksgiving, just another round of praise heaped on Elise while I played host in the background. But I felt the tension, not loud, not sharp, just slow, like a leak behind the drywall. And I knew it wouldn't stay quiet forever, especially not this time. The chandeliers caught the crystal just right, turning every wine glass into a performance piece. Candlelight flickered off the silverware, and the whole room smelled like truffle oil and curated memories. Elise, naturally, wore white backless, silky, probably borrowed and definitely steamed by someone else. She called it her ceremonial armor in an Instagram story earlier that morning. Mom called it ethereal. I called it what it was, a costume. 15 of us packed into that private room at the Brantley Club, and somehow every conversation orbited around Elise. Her journey, her healing process, her creative rebirth. The turkey was dry, but the praise was juicy. Cousin Dana gushed about the podcast episode on ancestral sensuality. Uncle Lou, bless his heart, asked if it was available on Spotify, then whispered to me, "What's a soft launch?" I didn't even try to explain. Elise basked. Hair curled just so. Nails painted a strategic nude. Every sigh, every laugh, every little head tilt was calculated to draw light. And Mom? Mom was practically levitating with pride. You'd think Elise had just cured something. Then came dessert. Miniature pumpkin soufflés. Dainty cups of espresso, and the moment Elise had clearly been waiting for. Mom rose from her chair. The chatter dimmed. She clinked her spoon against her glass, her eyes shining with Chardonnay and something heavier. "I just want to say something," she began, voice trembling like this was her Oscar speech. "To my daughter Elise." She paused, made sure we were all looking. "For teaching me that strength can be loud and soft things can be powerful." Chairs turned. Applause rose. Even the waiter at the edge of the room joined in with a polite smile. Elise's hand fluttered to her chest like she was touched, humbled, overcome. But her eyes never left me. That's when the waiter approached. Silent, efficient, a practiced motion. He placed a black leather folder right in front of me. I already knew what it was. Felt it before I saw it. Heavy with unspoken expectations. Final bill, $3,190. Not a dime had been shaved off. No one looked surprised. No one blinked. Elise sipped her champagne. Mom kept standing, glass still raised, like maybe if she didn't sit, she wouldn't have to see it land. A cousin cleared his throat. A chair creaked. That was it. All those words, celebration, empowerment, legacy, and suddenly, no one had anything to say. They just watched me. Waited. Because that's what I do, right? I pay. I smile. I nod while they celebrate each other for things I'd never get away with. I fund the illusion and take the photos. I pick up the tab, literally and metaphorically. Except this time, the folder wasn't just a bill. It was a test. A performance of its own. Would I do what I always did? Would I quietly sign, add the tip, and let them toast my silence? My son was watching. 2 seats down. He hadn't touched his dessert. My husband reached for my hand under the table. Warm. Steady. Not asking me to do anything, just reminding me I didn't have to do this alone. Across from me, Elise smirked. That was her mistake. She thought I'd stay in costume too. That I'd keep playing the part, the provider, the problem solver, the invisible wall holding up her spotlight. But I wasn't feeling generous anymore. I was feeling done. The moment stretched out like bad wallpaper, thin, curling, pretending to hold but ready to fall. No one moved. Not a single hand reached for a purse. Not a wallet. Not even a polite offer. It was like I had become invisible and hypervisible all at once. The designated provider who would, of course, pick up the bill with grace, dignity, and an apologetic smile. That was my role, wasn't it? The understudy in their little family pageant. The backdrop. Mom kept her glass raised, frozen in the middle of her toast, like a statue honoring delusion. Her eyes danced over the room but never landed on mine. Too busy glowing over Elise. Too afraid of what she might see if she looked at me straight on someone who wasn't nodding along anymore. A cousin cleared his throat like he was about to say something, then didn't. Elise took another sip of champagne, tilted her head back, and smiled to herself. One of those closed-lip, victorious smiles. Like a lioness watching a trapped snapshot. She didn't even glance my way. She didn't need to. The folder was in front of me, and the spotlight was in front of her. In her mind, the scene had played out already. And she'd won. I looked down at the total again. $3,190. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. If they'd asked, really asked, I might have paid it anyway. But they hadn't. They never did. It was expected. Built into the architecture of our family like drywall and duct tape. I was the one who filled the gaps, made the hard parts go away, did the ugly work so Elise could shine. But this time, it was different. Because my son was watching. He sat at the end of the table, elbows off, back straight, just like we'd taught him. But his eyes were locked on me. Not scared. Not confused. Just waiting. Taking it all in. Seeing everything that was being said without a single word spoken. And I saw myself at his age. Watching my own mother brush off my wins. Watching her pour love into Elise like there was a prize for favoritism. Watching the same dance. Just with different wallpaper. My wife's hand slipped under the table and found mine. Her fingers brushed mine once, then again like Morse code for I'm here. That one gesture, quiet as it was, felt louder than anything in the room. That was enough. I looked around the table. At Elise, draped in her delusions. At Mom, hiding behind her glass. At relatives who knew better but stayed quiet because calling it out would ruin dessert. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Not exhausted. Not broken. Just tired of pretending this was normal. Of carrying the weight so everyone else could feel light. They thought I'd cave. Sign the bill. Be gracious. Swallow it. Again. But the thing about silent pressure is it only works on people still playing the game. And I'd already decided. I was done playing. I stood up slowly. No drama. No loud scrape of the chair legs, no cleared throat. Just the soft, deliberate sound of cloth shifting and heels clicking once against polished hardwood. It was amazing how something so small could split the air wide open. 15 faces lifted. Forks paused midair. Even the waitstaff seemed to sense it. I picked up the leather folder, heavy, real, and took 2 quiet steps around the table. My heels tapped once, then again, like punctuation. Elise's head turned slightly, just enough for the glint of her earrings to catch the light. She must have thought I was going to handle it like usual. Pay the bill, paste on a smile, maybe make a joke to smooth over the tension. But I didn't stop where they expected me to. I stopped in front of her, and gently, so gently it felt surgical, slid the folder across the table, right up to her manicured hands. Perfect nails, fresh gel set. I wondered if she'd included that in her business expenses this month. Celebrating strong women, I said, my voice steady. Clear. No venom. Just fact. You got this. Then I turned and walked back to my seat. That's when the room went dead quiet. Not awkward, not confused still. Like the world was holding its breath. Like the floor itself was listening. Mom's mouth opened slightly, the way it always did when she wanted to say something but hadn't figured out how to protect Elise and scold me in the same sentence. Nothing came out. Elise blinked. Once. Twice. Then looked down at the folder like it had grown teeth. She didn't reach for it. Didn't laugh. Didn't make one of her chirpy, deflective jokes. For the first time in maybe her entire adult life, Elise had no script. Just a $3,190 reality check and an audience watching her hold it. Cousin Dana glanced at her purse, but didn't move. Aunt Maggie stared at me like I'd just stood on the table and screamed, but I hadn't. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a scene. All I did was slide a bill across the table. But it might as well have been a mirror. Because in that moment, everyone saw it, not just the total in the folder, but the totality of it all. The years. The assumptions. The convenience of letting one person carry the load as long as they did it quietly. And now here was that same person, calmly, firmly, handing it back. I sat down again and picked up my fork like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just shifted the tectonic plates of our family dinner. Elise's hands hovered near the folder, unsure. She looked to Mom, then to me, then back at the folder. No one bailed her out. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for making it her problem. I felt free. Elise let out a tight, breathy laugh. Oh, come on, she's joking, she said to no one in particular, her voice higher than usual. It bounced around the room like a balloon someone let go of, weightless, forced, desperate to distract from the obvious. But no one picked it up. Because I wasn't joking. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her and said, no, I'm not. Her lips parted, but the next line never came. I've covered holidays, I said quietly. Not loud. Not angry. Just full. Car repairs. Credit cards. I've fixed leaking ceilings and picked up your groceries. Paid Mom's premiums when she was 2 months behind and too proud to admit it. I looked around the table. Not for drama, but so they couldn't pretend later that they hadn't heard. But this. I nodded gently toward the candlelit room, the white tablecloths, the butter swans melting in their trays. This wasn't for me. No one moved. Not a clink of a spoon. Not a cleared throat. Just the ambient hum of silence, thick and hot like July air. And behind it, under it, I felt it. That invisible shift. The unraveling. Because once the truth starts moving, it doesn't crawl. It spills. I watched Elise shrink a fraction. It was subtle, a shift in her posture, the loss of that performative ease she wore like perfume. Her fingers hovered near the folder like maybe if she touched it, it would disappear. It didn't. This room, this dinner, this moment, it wasn't about family, I went on. It was a stage, a spotlight, and I'm done wiring the lights while being told to clap. Someone at the end of the table, I think it was Uncle Lou, shifted like he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. And Mom? She still hadn't sat down. still holding that glass like it might save her from having to choose a side. Elise, I said gently, not cruelly. You talk about empowerment. You post about independence. So here's a gift. A real one. You get to own this moment. Her eyes flicked to Mom, looking for backup, for rescue, for anything. None came. Because here's the thing they never tell you about being the responsible one. The moment you stop, the whole machine sputters. Not because they're broken without you, but because they've never had to be whole on their own. And now they did. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. Elise sat very still. The folder remained unopened, her plate untouched. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of water. It tasted cold and honest. Let them sit in it. I had for years. My wife stood first, quietly. No announcement. No dramatic flair. She just folded her napkin, set it beside her untouched souffle, and rose from her seat with the kind of stillness that speaks louder than any tantrum ever could. My son followed without hesitation. He didn't ask. He didn't look around for permission. Just stood up, grabbed his blazer off the back of the chair, and fell into step behind her like this was something he'd already rehearsed in his mind. How to walk away with your spine intact. I stayed for one more beat. Long enough to meet Elise's eyes. Long enough for her to realize I wasn't bluffing. And then I stood too. No farewell. No fake hug. No obligatory kiss on Mom's cheek. Just the sound of 3 chairs sliding back and 3 people choosing peace over performance. We moved past the waitstaff without a word. Past relatives still frozen in their places, unsure if they were witnessing a crack or a complete collapse. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. The kind that slices through a thick room and reminds you what breathing is supposed to feel like. We didn't speak as we walked to the car. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, it was clean. When we got in, my husband started the engine. My son looked out the window. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the golden glow of the Brantley Club fade behind us. Then my phone buzzed. A Venmo notification. From Elise. Amount, $1. Caption, for the toast face blowing kiss. I stared at it. For a second, maybe 2. Then I locked my phone and slipped it into the glove compartment. Not because it hurt, but because it proved exactly what I needed to know. She still didn't get it. She thought this was about money, about pettiness, about theatrics. She thought she could toss me $1 like it was a tip for service rendered, a wink-wrapped insult, a cute little clapback she could screenshot later. But the real shift had nothing to do with the bill. It was that I left, and took myself with me. All those years, I'd been the scaffolding propping up her image, Mom's favoritism, the illusion of a family built on fairness. And now, let her pay for the meal. Let her bask in the spotlight without the crew holding up the lights. Let her post another filtered story about choosing joy while the foundation crumbles. Because the minute I stepped out of that room, their story changed. And I didn't have to say a single word. That night, after we got home and my son was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. No big speech. No breakdown. Just tabs and login screens. One by one, I revoked every link they'd quietly wrapped around me over the years. Mom's grocery account? Access removed. Her phone bill and utilities? Auto payments canceled. The emergency Venmo backup she'd quietly used to bail Elise out of surprise overdrafts? Unlinked. No warning. No farewell. Just a quiet rollback of a life I never actually agreed to carry. It wasn't about revenge. Not even close. It was about the weight, the decades of financial and emotional handholding disguised as family loyalty. The way I'd been tricked into believing that love had to be measured in monthly transfers and silent sacrifices. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just done paying the toll on a one-way street. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:14 a.m. sharp. As always, Mom. I let it ring once. Twice. Picked up on the third because I knew she'd just keep calling. Good morning, I said, voice flat but polite. There was a pause, like she wasn't sure who she'd reached. Then, I saw the notice on the utility account this morning. And the grocery card. Did something happen? I didn't sigh. Didn't explain. Just answered her like I'd answer any business call. Yes. I made some changes. Another pause. Then, trying a softer tone, the one she used when Elise was nursing a hangover or nursing her ego, I didn't know it meant that much to you. And that was the thing. It didn't. Not anymore. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. The sun had just broken over the rooftops, and everything looked new in that way it only does when you finally stop carrying what doesn't belong to you. It doesn't, I said. Not the money, not the gesture, not the toast. But the assumption? That I'd keep doing it no matter how many times you handed Elise the mic and sent me the invoice? Yeah, that part's over. She tried to regroup. You're upset. This was just a misunderstanding. No, I said calmly. It was clarity. And I've moved on. There was nothing left to argue. Nothing she could throw at me that I hadn't already carried. And now that I'd set it down, I could finally see just how much it never belonged to me in the first place. I guess we'll figure something out, she muttered, like it was a burden I should still feel guilty about. I'm sure you will, I replied. And then I hung up, not out of anger, but because the conversation was over. The era was over. The version of me that they depended on, the silent safety net, the backup wallet, the invisible emotional janitor, didn't live here anymore. And the peace? It was staggering. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't budgeting for someone else's dreams. I was building my own. 1 month later, the air felt lighter, crisp, honest. Like the season had finally caught up to the shift I'd made internally. My son's school hosted a small ceremony, nothing extravagant, just rows of folding chairs in the multipurpose room and a table with cookies wrapped in napkins. He'd won a national essay contest. Top 10 in the country. He'd written about integrity. About what it means to be the person who does the right thing even when no one's watching. He didn't mention names, but I recognized the bones of our family in every paragraph. The quiet loyalty, the thankless roles. The moment a person decides to stop being the scaffolding for someone else's storyline. I read it 3 times before the ceremony and cried once, alone, while folding laundry. When the school asked how many guests he'd be bringing, I said just one. My dad. He drove in that morning, arrived 10 minutes early, tie slightly crooked, eyes a little damp. We sat side by side, clapping as my son walked across the stage, clutching a plaque too big for his backpack and smiling with that rare mix of pride and disbelief. When the applause died down, my father turned to me and said, "You didn't tell me it was this big." "It's his moment," I said. I just got the privilege of watching it. After the ceremony, we went to a small diner down the street. Vinyl booths, endless refills, comfort food. We didn't talk about Mom, or Elise, or Thanksgiving. Not until the check came. He reached for it, then hesitated. "This one's mine," he said, almost sheepishly. I let him. No protest. No dance. Over coffee, he leaned back and stared out the window for a beat before saying, "I read your sister's book." I looked up, waited. He swirled his spoon slowly, as if buying time to find the right words. "It felt empty," he said at last. I didn't gloat, didn't pile on. I just smiled. "Some stories only hold up when someone else pays the bill," I said softly. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. No follow-up needed. We left the diner quietly, full in a way that had nothing to do with food. Later that night, I watched my son place his plaque on his desk. Not for show, not for photos. Just to remind himself, I guess, that being thoughtful, steady, and honest still meant something in a world that often favored flash over substance. He looked over at me and said, "You were proud, right?" "More than proud," I said. "I'm honored." And I meant it. Because in a world full of Elisa's, spotlight chasers with expensive illusions, I was raising someone who didn't need applause to know his worth. I never needed revenge. I just needed release. And that meant finally, not paying the bill for someone else's lie.